For Gifts.The Old Karga, a scary tale. He communicates more with the cat than with me. Lisa picturesquely cupped her hands, the long fingers of her left hand clutching the phalanges of her right, hard but careful enough to avoid hitting the rhinestones on her manicure. The spot where the wedding ring was is already covered with the tan of 3 or 4 resorts, but it's still itchy at times, and Lisa mechanically corrects it with the pad of her thumb. The phrase about the cat was also uttered in the offices of the guardianship and custody agencies, where Lisa was summoned by another suitor without a turn, at the psychologist of private practice, whose session, lasting 40 minutes and exceeding the average minimum wage in the region, was paid by another man not indifferent to the aroma of her hair. She also repeated this phrase and the clasp of her hands to the astrologer, who drew the zodiacal belts and celestial equators on her black and white photograph, all to calculate key shift points in her destiny. Lisa bathed in men's attention, as a swimming coach confidently and professionally. In school she was looked upon by high school seniors and young teachers. At university she did not pass the first session, rejected several marriage proposals, and by the end of the 5th year to the university building for Lisa cars, whose cost could feed an average family for several years. But fate, a mockingbird, disposed of differently, and the girl, who by 26 was already used to travel only in the leather seats of the elite taxi fleet wheelie, whose average check in restaurants, for which she never paid, rarely had less than 4 zeros, and used to communicate with men according to the formula: communication time equals the value of assets multiplied by the derivative of the amount of gifts divided by the age of the suitor, was sucked headlong into some chaotic, half-crazy maelstrom of passions of worldly, even domestic, but for Lisa it was a breath of fresh air. This guy was from the neighboring yard of her childhood, a hooligan, but one of the noble ones, the ones who protect their street and their own. His father, an ordinary laborer, could not give his son the education he deserved, because he had a stroke when he was 14, so he had to make it through part-time work. The boy did not allow himself to overcome everyday life and hardships. He mixed the spirits of a poet, a rebel and a fighter, so a little later, at a mature age, a chance meeting, Lisa saw that boy from childhood, but in a fit body of a young man and with a slight tragedy in his eyes, which happens in those whose family members were gone before their due time. And Lisa forgot about her promises to her girlfriends to marry only an oligarch, her plans for a personal maid from Nepal, her chalet near the Alps, and her expectations of year-round tans at California resorts. Instead, she plunged headlong into the love sung by all the poets of the world. The feelings were binding, constricting, like scarfing, and giving her that whirlwind of emotion that every girl's secret trunk of a book heroine experiences. He showed her another world. It was catamarans on the Amu Darya, and a tour on camelback, but not in the Emirates, but in Uzbekistan, and overnight stays under the open sky, not 4 seasons, and songs by the fire with his friends, as ordinary as he himself, and as open, honest and simple. In this waterfall of feelings Archie was born. A boy with ashy hair and sad corners of his lips. It seemed to Lisa that with the birth of the child, it was as if she was more, as if he were an extension of her. She could feel even at night, in the other room, the pacifier falling out of his mouth, and when Archie cried from colic in the stomach, Lisa herself was writhing in pain. The happiness her son gave her overshadowed everything else. Having read somewhere that it is useful for a child to grow up with an animal, Lisa insisted on getting a cat, diligently chose among the fancy Munchkins and Devon Rexes, and then accidentally a black fluffy lump ran into the apartment, rushed straight into Archie's room and crawled under the couch. With persuasion and selfies did not get him, but after a day of meowing, he still was placated with a bowl of milk and promises not to hurt him. Watching the lump pecking at the milk, Archie laughed. He laughed long, gleefully, sincerely, as only children can. Lysene's heart dropped to the basement floor, and then soared into the stratosphere. She would feed the kitten anything every day, even a rabbit, even a duck, even if she had to hunt them herself, just to hear her son laughing. They kept the fluffy kitty, they never gave it a name, but it didn't need one. When the family had a need for comfort, they would hear purring at their feet and see little black eyes. Lisa was surprised only by the veterinarian, who, after drawing blood from the kitten, God forbid any parasites, and the animal would be with child, for a long time was scrutinizing the mobile laboratory readings, and then muttered something like the tests were like those of a 30-year-old cat, and when the lady, who had read 50 pages of internet before, and that there are no such cats in the wild, made a quite reasonable remark that his ignorance of such obvious facts raised more questions than the tests of a playful and apparently healthy cat, showed her the door. She never went to this vet clinic again, and even wrote some unflattering reviews about it on the forums about pets, and I recommend. Archie, like a sea breeze fills the sails of a fishing boat after a doldrums, filled her life with meaning. And also when her life stealthily began to come and quietly whisper about themselves the very echoes of the promises that Lisa gave her friends after 3 glasses of crystal. About the Maldives and Tiffany's, about the Porsche. They talked about yacht clubs and old Tuscan vineyards, promised future evenings in La Rochelle in the company of young Frenchmen. And they also spoke contemptuously of her companion. "He's not that good," they said at night, "he's not worthy of you." They woke Lisa in the morning. "Do you need him?" they burst into her head at noon. She did not listen to them, but they were persistent in their whispers. Her spouse was indeed a lingering infatuation for her, a kind of natural phenomenon, powerful, indomitable, and willful, but temporary. Lisa was really beginning to notice that his feelings for her were not what they used to be. That he didn't keep his promises to her. He doesn't know how to finish things. He hadn't been like that before. Everything that the ghosts of her past life before him had whispered to her had come true. Puzzles were piecing together a picture. And when it seemed that this picture was enough to hate the man, the ghosts took out another box of puzzles, and so on, day after day. Being around her husband, Lisa became ashamed. And if she was ashamed to tell him directly at first, but now she was not even embarrassed by the fact that Archie has reached an age where he heard and understood everything that happens at home. And it was getting colder and colder at home, the comfort and warmth was gone. Only the black lump still slept at his son's feet, and dipped its white whiskers into the bowl of milk that Lisa still put by his bedside. During another of Lisa's scandals, her husband silently got up, threw on a hoodie, and left the apartment. No sudden movements, no slamming the door, no throwing insults in Lisa's face. He never did that. And there was no reason to. He could see that their relationship resembled a sinking barge, but he didn't understand what had caused it. Without bad habits, athletic, giving all the love and soul to the family, with decent wages, he did not know about the voices of the past, and did not want to think about all that so pulled his wife to the past life. Putting his hands in his pockets, throwing on his hood, he quickly descended the stairs, deliberately ignoring the glossy elevator doors, monolithic and heavy, like the gates of a ziggurat. As he stepped out into the courtyard, he looked around and strode toward the stadium. Another forced escape, which would allow his wife to cool down, to vent his anger, dissatisfaction and rage in the dishes, beating which had become habitual, swearing with the concierge, cursing and crying. A forced escape from the apartment, from his wife, from the storm of hatred. As soon as the passions subside, he would return as usual, embrace her, soothe her, whisper in her ear, and they would fall asleep, albeit in different rooms. But this time, leaving his apartment, leaving the entrance, heading down the familiar path, walked many dozens of times, he left his problems for good, leaving his life. First a broken beer bottle on his head, and a few dozen blows with a screwdriver to the neck, chest, and stomach, and 4 17-year-olds, cackling and recording everything on their phones, having searched the pockets of the twisted body and finding nothing, disappeared in the gloom of the streets. The funeral passed unnoticed by Lisa, and in a closed casket for her, now ex-spouse. Archie stood silently beside her. He did not hold his mother's hand. He did not cry. From that moment on, never again. Even months after the last handful of earth had fallen on his father's coffin lid, even when he caught pneumonia and burned as if on fire, he only clenched his baby teeth tighter, and looked at his furry companion. He looked with his father's gray, slightly sad eyes, and his father looked back at him with feline understanding and unblinking eyes. And then it began. He talks to the cat more than he talks to me. This time Lisa was wringing her hands, sitting on a stool in Zagornovo, near Moscow, in a wooden house, at a table covered with a linen tablecloth. On the table was tea in a faceted glass with a cup holder, apparently stolen back in the 70s from a railroad car. An ordinary tea bag floated freely in the glass, like a sailboat in a small lake. The witch, as the locals called her, took her time molding dumplings, not looking at the capital's visitor at all. It was hard to get to you, Lisa began another tactic, having received no feedback on her crony line. Those who really need it get in, came the brief reply without irony or sarcasm. That's the way it works, was the compliment. An awkward pause lingered. Are you sleeping well? Lovingly packing mincemeat into a thin pastry flatbread, and again without even looking at Lisa looking around, the landlady asked. No dried herbs, no candles, no amulets. Nothing. What? Yes, perhaps, sometimes distracted by her own thoughts, Lisa tried to evoke such a familiar sense of distrust in the dissonance of stereotypes. They say sorceress, and nothing witch in the house and not seen, clean, neat, cozy and fresh. Wanted to question all these reviews about the witch, passed in whispers in the kitchen and taboo for the internet and correspondence, even a friend, who wrote the address on a piece of paper. Lisa generally believed that she could not write, and dictated SMS on his iPhone, with gloomy and disturbing notes in his voice told Lisa that she could not write about her on WhatsApp or telegrams and the internet too, why is unknown, but Lisa and did not ask. But there could be no doubt here even with all her cynical nature. The girl knew that she was in the right place. And the sun? The next question hung in the air. Lisa thought for a moment. Well. She stretched out. We have cartoons and a timer on the TV, everyone goes to bed at 10 sharp. Daughter, you don't understand, I asked, is my son sleeping well? I haven't heard him complain, he's always awake in the morning, began, in the usual manner Lisa, but stumbled, catching her eyes. Sorceress, she stood in front of her and looked directly into her eyes, not blinking and not taking off prickly stare. Lisa only now noticed that the witch was not even 50. No, I'm not sure, I don't know, she stretched out. You'll find out, come, came the reply. Not rude, mundane. The girl felt that she was not being chased away. And the hostess put an oatmeal cookie beside her and gestured for a treat. She said, you won't stay for dumplings, I know, you'll get home in time to go to Moscow, you'll have time for everything. The tea was delicious, like from her childhood, and the cookies were delicious and crispy. Lisa immediately remembered how she and her husband drank tea at his great-aunt's in a remote village somewhere near Tver. Strangely enough, the memory was as warm as tea, and the negativity evaporated as if it had never existed. A Yandex business cab was taking Lisa home along the Gorky Highway. For the first time since her husband's death, she thought about him for so long, and not a single whisper rang in her head. She did not wear mourning, but to the witch as if on purpose she came in all black, bringing even a black Jimmy Choo clutch, which she opened and pulled out $2,000 bills to pay, but the woman, wiping her hands, white with flour on her apron, only shook her head. You don't have to pay, not me, and misfired. Certainly not me, and turned away. The car's here for you, she said instead of goodbye. Although what goodbye was, Lisa sensed that she was ready to come to this house every week. It's quiet here, it's as cozy as it used to be at their home. Her nose twitched a little, and Lisa touched the bridge of her nose, thinking she was going to start crying. It's my fault, it's my fault. A whisper in her head, but not the one that promised and beckoned, condemned and incited. But the inner, underlying won her. In these thoughts she spent the entire drive. The driver, an experienced driver, was silent the whole way, understanding the passenger, or maybe he did not care about her tears and her worries. It was 9 o'clock, and going up in an elevator, Lisa, quickly finding the right key, turning it 3 times, jerked the handle. It's locked. Footsteps could be heard outside the door. It was the nanny running, shuffling loudly in her large rag slippers. Lisa did not accept the American fashion of walking around the apartment with shoes on. I told you not to lock the latch. Excuse me, Elizaveta Andreevna, the elderly woman, probably a former teacher, stood before her, eyes downcast, like a schoolgirl. You are dismissed for the day, thank you, and, already forgetting the nurse's gaffe, who was hurriedly changing her shoes to catch the last bus, went into the nursery. The Disney Channel with the next characters is such a tradition with Archie and the cat. They were lying down, Archie on the pillows, the kitten, who never seemed to grow since settling in with them, lay on Archie's feet. When Lisa walked in, treading softly on the quartz vinyl, no one turned around. Lots of bedtime cartoons are bad for you. Let's go to sleep. Lisa kept hoping for a response and expected crankiness or at least a whimper, but Archie handed her the remote, said, "Good night," and turned onto his side. Lisa kissed his forehead and asked, "Are you getting a good night's sleep?" There was no answer, only the kitten moved from her feet to the headboard of the bed, where the baby was breathing. It was warmer there. "Well, go to sleep, my men." Lisa ran the back of her palm over the sensor, and the light went out quietly. After making herself comfortable on the bed, opening Netflix on her tablet and flipping through a couple of reviews, she caught herself thinking that she didn't want to watch anything. She wasn't in the right mood. She wanted to put her face into the pillow and howl, or better yet, to snuggle up and fall asleep right away, to have morning at once, to have a whirl of things to do, to think away, to change everything in some other way. But as always happens, when I have to go to sleep, I can't sleep. Lisa had already flipped the pillow and thrown off the blanket. She switched the smart house remote to microventilate the windows, even tried to go to the fridge. All to no avail. Sleep was not even close. Various uncontrollable thoughts hovered in her head about her husband, about Archie, about tomorrow's meeting with Yuri. I wonder how many Yuris she had? Then self-loathing, then self-pity. All these thoughts swirled in her mind in a split second, and then turned around and swept through again, through another door of her inner fortress, which turned out to be crystal, and so repeated infinitely many times. And, like a flash, the thought of how Archie was hooked on as a trigger. Maybe he was sad and crying. Maybe he was tossing and turning and couldn't sleep, like she was. A mother's heart knows no self-pity. Lisa, slipping off the bed, barefoot, carefully, like a beggar boy in church, step by step approached Archie's room. The door was half open, for children are afraid to sleep with the doors closed. She peeked inside. The room was exactly the same as when she left, only Archie had dropped his blanket, and the black kitten lay at his feet, as if warming his owner. Lisa looked at the Apple Watch, covering it with her palm so the occasional light source wouldn't disturb the sleeping babies. It was 1:30, and it was time for her to go to bed. Back in the room, she grabbed her tablet again, wanting something bawdy, and there was plenty of that on streaming services. She put her noise-canceling plugs in her ears and watched a good 2 hours of stories where everyone loves each other, then they leave each other, then they love each other again, and so on until they all feel good. Headphones beeped that the charge is running out. Lisa didn't even bother to put them away in the case, threw them on her slipper if she's going to charge them, then tomorrow morning, looked at her watch. 3:13. The apartment was so quiet you'd have thought they'd turned the whole condominium on. Still, I should go get a drink of water, maybe it would help. Inserting her foot into her slipper, Liza cursed to herself. She had just put the ear there herself. That's the tree. At night her head is not thinking, and sleep still does not come. In annoyance she dropped her slipper, so that the headphones rolled under the bed. Yep, perfect end to the day. When will this nightmare end? Stroking her hair and trying to yawn and thereby invoke sleep, Lisa walked out into the hallway, the kitchen on her right, on her left, a few feet away, the door to Archie's. Lisa really wanted to kiss her sleeping angel, so she tiptoed to her left. Then another and another, from toe to heel, to slip quietly like a mouse into her son's room and leave him sleeping with a cooling kiss. A step, another step. Mom, be quiet, Lisa shuddered. The door to the room was still slightly ajar, but they were talking from the hallway a little farther away, by the hallway. Squinting and taking a few steps, she saw Archie sitting on the floor in the hallway, picking over some small toys. As she took another step, she heard the pulsing breath of a kitten. It was sitting at Archie's left foot, wrapped around his ankle with its tail, and trying to play with the tip of it with its paw. My darling, why aren't you asleep? Feeling the need to be on the same page as her child at this moment, sensing his importance, Lisa sat down next to him and propped her feet up, and the words she didn't whisper but spoke with her lips alone. Mother, I never sleep, do I? And how long have you never slept, my superhero? Mom tried to joke. Ever since Daddy left, the boy looked at her with serious gray eyes. My treasure, Daddy's gone to heaven, he's watching us from there. Mama, Daddy's not in heaven. He's not here either. How do you know? Magoth said, nodding at the kitten. Mago, you say? Is that what you called him? He's always been called that, Mother. He's just a kitten, who called him that? Mistress. Children tend to make up all sorts of stories, even if they're not exactly children's stories. What are those toys, Archie? I've never seen them before. The sensor on the clock went off and illuminated 30 centimeters from Lisa's outstretched hand to the toys, which she immediately yanked away. Her son, 5-year-old Archie, and his furry companion were playing with teeth. The teeth were different milky baby teeth, slightly larger and with roots. There were canine-like fangs, and broad ones that clearly belonged to a herbivore. There were several dozen, if not hundreds of them. What are they, Archie? They're teeth, Mother. I can see it. Where did they come from? Mago brings them to me every night before I go to bed. That's how we play. One night, one tooth. What kind of game is that? Well, it's not really a game, Mago says it's how we count days. 600 days, 600 teeth. And then what happens when you collect them? We give them away. To whom? Mama, the one who's coming. Son, what are you talking about? Who's coming? Karga. Baba Yaga? I'll sue that babysitter who's filling your head with all sorts of fairy tales. No family will take her in. Baba Yaga was invented, Mother. Karga had always lived. Archie looked at Lisa with a heavy, sinful look, not at all boyish, and thoughtfully took a pile of baby teeth in his hand and transferred them from palm to palm. The kitten, almost hidden by the semi-darkness of the hallway, settled between Archie's knees, yawned and stared straight into Lisa's eyes. Mommy, you know Daddy didn't leave by himself, don't you? I could hear the mystery in the boy's voice. You know he didn't want to leave the apartment, he didn't want to go anywhere. He was still gone. And now he's not at God's, he's not at yours, he's not at mine either. And he's not downstairs either. Archie whispered, turning in head to look his mother in the eye. Did Magog tell you that? 3 childish, short nods in response. The cat hissed at Lisa. She tried to move, but it was as if she were paralyzed. There is no such thing as Baba Yaga, Mother. She was invented by adults to make children obey them. Because adults don't hear children at all. But the adults have forgotten that there is an old woman with no name who hears children everywhere. She has cats, many, many cats, and Magog has many, many brothers and sisters. Lisa shakes and tries to cry, but the tears fall into her eyes. She hears children everywhere. When we cry, when we laugh. The old woman is blind. No, not from birth, she just has no eyes, not at all, she doesn't need them. She gives the children cats, and we collect teeth for her, she likes to play with them too. She's got lots and lots and lots of teeth. We give them to her, and she puts them in her mouth so there's more. That's funny, isn't it? And there's that sincere childish laughter again. It sounded mocking in the black hallway, as if spoken not by a child, but by something that had long ago banished a child from its body, and was only pretending to be one. Why are you telling me all this? Faintly whispered Lisa, already pounding and squeezing her throat to the point of nausea. I called out to her, Mother, and she heard me. You'll see, she'll lead us to Daddy, and we'll be together again.